Okay. This is
Hello,
our
everybody.
presentation.
We are okay. All right, ready? Hello, everybody. We are doing our presentation on gun control laws. I'm Sheridan Cody McFalls,
I'm Jessica Urban.
I'm Tiffany Farmer.
and this is our presentation. All right, so we're going to start off with a few important dates in the history of America. 1791, the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms, was passed in the Constitution. In 1837, Georgia attempted to ban handguns. Now, this was the first situation where any state had tried to entirely ban a gun. And it did not pass, and it changed the fate of America. In 1968, the Gun Control Act of 1968 was passed, and what it basically entailed was that people needed to have more restrictions on guns. So certain people wouldn't be allowed to have guns, as opposed to in the past where almost anyone could have a gun. So it basically began it's basically the core of all gun control laws. And in 1972, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives is established. And this bureau basically is responsible for taking care of any firearm regulations that have to be put into place. Okay, so some gun control regulators. The National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS, is basically a system that allows any marketer of guns to quickly check a person's background and see if they have any history of mental illnesses, felonies, etc., etc. And oftentimes, this could take a matter of minutes just to check with the system and ensure that that person is eligible or not to buy a gun. Federal firearms licensees, FFLS, these are the people who basically give out licenses to own firearms. So they're the ones who will give you a license if you pass their test. The Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act was a very important part of history. It basically started, okay, next. Federal punishment of illegal, okay. So some of the punishments for illegally owning a gun include 10 years imprisonment, and that's the maximum. It can be less, but the maximum is 10 years imprisonment. But people who should not own own firearms and who are eligible to be jailed for up to 10 years include felons, drug users or addicts, aliens, people who have a restraining order, people who have a history of domestic violence, and fugitives.
Okay, these are some statistics on gun laws. Over 900,000 times per year, well over 900,000 times per year, a U.S. civilian has used a gun to defend him or herself. And in 1982, they did a survey of male felons in prison, and this was 11 state prisons across the entire United States. So it was very big sample size. They didn't just pick from one little area. And 34% of these felons reported being scared off, shot at, wounded, or captured by an armed victim. And this is not by another criminal, this is by a victim who they were hurting, or actually had decided not to hurt. 40 had decided not to commit a crime because they knew or believed that the victim was carrying a gun. And 69% personally knew other criminals who had been scared off, shot at, wounded, or captured by an armed victim. And this just really shows like how much armed civilians can help stop crime. 69% of people in jails knew someone who stopped doing it, whether that meant themselves or one of their friends. And it really just shows how much civilians owning guns can help the crime rate. It was interesting that Georgia was the first to try to ban all handguns because a small town in Georgia, years later in 1982, Kensaw, Georgia, actually passed a law requiring all heads of households to keep at least one firearm in the house. And this can be, like, if it's a single mother, it's the mother, it's a father or a grandfather. Just the head of household just has to own one gun. And the residential burglary rate went down 89% in Kensaw, which is a drastic change. That's just 11% shy of 100, so it almost completely dropped. And overall in Georgia, that law was coincided with 10.4% drop in Georgia crime as a whole. And every public shooting, mass shooting in the U.S. has happened on an area that did not allow guns, with one exception of the attack on Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords in Tucson in 2011.
And one more statistic here. More than a third of Americans, or 37% to be more approximate, say that they or someone in their household owns a gun. From the Pew Research Center, this was gathered. Now granted, these statistics are like any statistics and are not definitely for certain. However, you can add on to it the amount of people who probably don't want to share that they have guns. So it's probably more about somewhere around 50% or more, probably more. All right.
And that research was done in 2013, so it's a very recent survey.
Yes. Okay, so the NRA-ILA, which stands for the National Rifle Association - Institute for Legislative Action. Okay, so interstates. Interstates do not require a permit to carry guns across state lines on the interstate. There is no regulations for carrying the guns across the interstates, but you do have to check with state laws, depending on which states you're going into, to see if what you're carrying is allowed there. Basically, airports, airport laws for guns include that you should contact the airline in advance, obtain a written copy of the airline policy, bring the copy to the airport for reference. Firearms must be unloaded and in a locked, hard-sided container as checked. Baggage. Limited exceptions for law enforcement officers who may fly armed. So certain police officers or air marshals are allowed to carry guns on planes. Other than that, you're not allowed to. But basically, these are all current gun laws that help to enact a certain sort of order for interstate, well, not just interstate, but also for airlines. And here's our video.
We're here to talk about gun control today, which really shouldn't be an issue since it's outlined in the Second Amendment that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So let's talk about the #1 slogan I see: gun control equals crime control. How are you going to control crime? By taking away guns from law-abiding citizens. You're not going to take the guns away from the criminals. They don't follow laws. So you order everyone to turn their weapons in. Well, the criminals aren't going to turn their weapons in. That's why they're criminals. They don't care. And anyways, in interviews I've watched, criminals are more afraid of a civilian who has a gun than they are of the police. Because police have laws. Police just can't pull up and see you breaking into a house and shoot you. And criminals know that. They know how the system works. But if they're breaking into a civilian's house, that civilian can shoot him right there on the spot, and they know that, and it scares the bejeebus out of them. And if you even notice, all of the shooting sprees, they always take place in a gun-free zone. Gun-free zones don't matter. Criminals don't follow laws. We've discussed this. So why on earth would making the whole country a gun-free zone stop shooting sprees? So now let's take a look at China. You cannot own a gun in China. Only the military and police own guns in China. So they have school stabbings instead. People get crazy, they go to schools, and they stab the little kids to death. Just recently, they had 22 kids get stabbed and a civilian faculty member in their schools. Gun control is clearly working in that country. No one is shooting up schools anymore. They're going in there with a knife and stabbing everyone to death, which is so much better. The police cannot protect the schools. They literally have now cops surrounding the schools like it's a military base, just to stop people from stabbing kids to death. There's always going to be crazy people. Taking away everyone's right of self-defense is not going to stop crime. It's a ridiculous idea. And speaking about great ideas, they've designed a system where you push the guy with a knife away with a giant fork, as if he's not going to throw the knife at your face. This is clearly another great idea China has, since they're the leaders of good ideas now. On a more serious note, let's look at the teachers who died defending these kids, using themselves as human shields, which is truly heroic of them. It's amazing to think that there's people out there who would do this for complete strangers' kids. What if you gave those people a gun and they were trained by law enforcement on how to use it, how to stop criminals? Those gunmen wouldn't make it 10 feet. But, oh, you might say, what if the teachers go crazy themselves and shoot kids? Well, that doesn't happen. We can look at countries like Israel, where they actually arm the teachers. America pays for it. We put the weapons in the schools, because school shootings are very common in Israel, since they're surrounded by enemies. So actually the teachers have guns. After they did this, was there suddenly a wave of crime or shootings? No, because now you have a large body of teachers who are armed and trained by the military to defend the children in the school. Now let's take a look at some of the statistics, where you can clearly see every time they ban guns or take them away, crime rate goes up. Every time guns are in abundance, free, open, and easy to get, crime rate goes down. Let me show you. Let's take a look at Washington, where after their gun ban in 1976, the murder rate rose. It was falling right before they banned guns. Then they banned guns, murder rate went skyrocketing out of control until the Supreme Court made an intelligent decision for once and eliminated the gun ban. Since then, murder rates have been dropping again. which is kind of proof in itself. Let's look at Switzerland. They have one of the lowest crime rates in the world. Because in Switzerland, they don't have a standing army. They have a militia. If you're a young male in the ages of 20 to 30, you join the militia, where you're trained, and you're given a weapon, and you keep that weapon at home. That weapon stays in your house. So about every house has a weapon in it. And there's people who all know how to use the weapon. Does that mean there's so much crime stuff because there's so many guns on the street? No, it's the exact opposite. There's like no crime. Because if you want to rob a bank, Grandma behind you's packing heat in her purse and she's going to shoot you. The guy you're robbing has a gun on him, he's going to shoot you. Everyone there is military trained. You're not going to shoot up anything because everyone has a gun. But in conclusion, I'll give you a couple of my sources so you can look it up, verify. I got a few sources here. Just kidding, I got a lot of sources. Look at them. Bye.
All right.
What are we at? 16 minutes. Okay, well that video brought up a lot of good points, some which we'll cover again later in other parts of our presentation. But for now we're going to look at the ethics, and the first we're going to look at is utilitarianism. And utilitarianism, again, is the most benefit for the most amount of people. So the ends justify the means, like however much, whatever we need to do to make the most benefit for the most people is what we need to do. And our view on this is that, in a utilitarianistic point of view, giving more guns to everyone is the best thing to do, and not restricting guns. More guns means a safer world and is better for more people because more people are able to defend themselves against those few who are trying to victimize everyone else. And we have some stories on this example a little bit later in the presentation as well.
Deontologically, deontology goes by the ideas of rights, duty, and tradition, rules that have been passed down through generations, through common beliefs and family and communities. And it's in our Constitution for us to be able to own guns. The Second Amendment says the right to bear arms. So we have the right to keep them until we don't deserve that right anymore.
Examples of this are felons who aren't allowed to have guns,
Right.
and people with a history of specific mental illnesses, like we mentioned last time in the NIC part. We also have a duty to help others who don't have any guns. So if it's your belief that you don't want a gun, but you believe others can have some, those who do own guns should still be able to protect you.
Just like in the instances with the schools, where the teachers in Israel had guns and were able to protect their students. So here are some stories that we have.
Are these the stories?
Yeah, these are the stories.
Are these the Sheridan stories or
This is
the?
what we have so far.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, these are the shared stories.
Yeah, there are other stories.
Okay,
Another
yeah.
slide.
Stories with Sheridan.
I've got to talk more before, like,
You want to do deontology?
yeah, I can. Is
Alright,
that the
so
one
this
Sheridan
one,
just did?
this story says that an armed man entered a family pharmacy in Taney County, Montana,
and ordered an employee to give him pills. One of the store's employees responded by retrieving a gun and firing at the robber, striking him and causing him to flee. The criminal was captured by police a short time later. Following the incident, Taney County Sheriff Jimmy Russell told a media outlet, "As long as you've got store owners or store employees who are well trained and proficient with firearms, more power to them."
And this is even a backing from a sheriff saying that more people should be able to have more guns. Okay. This next story is about a 14-year-old boy in Phoenix. He was babysitting his family, for his family. He has an 8-year-old younger sibling and two 12-year-old younger siblings. The incident started with a woman ringing the doorbell to the residence, but the boy didn't know who it was. So being trained well by his parents, he didn't answer it, and he ignored it. A short time later, the boy heard a loud bang, which he assumed was someone attempting to force through the door, and he assumed that correctly. And he quickly gathered up all his siblings and took them upstairs and stood in front of them with a gun. And he hid in his parents' bedroom. From the top of the stairs, the boy saw a man break open the front door, and when the man pointed a gun at the boy shot the man before the intruder could even get towards his. Now, if this boy hadn't been able to, if this boy's parents hadn't had a gun, if this boy hadn't been trained with a gun, if basically the family's gun wasn't in this scenario, it was just a bunch of kids getting shot at in their parents' bedroom. But since they were able to have a gun and they were able to protect themselves and teach their children how to protect themselves, their family's safe, which is really important. And the man even had a gun, and it was obviously more than one person. There was a woman and a man both trying to get into this house and shoot these kids for whatever reason, we don't know. But it was like having more guns equals having more safe families.
Okay, pro-guns equals anti-rape. Here's Monica Jones said Thursday she was more angry than afraid when she rushed to the aid of a screaming neighbor girl, pointed a shotgun at the man who had allegedly ripped off the youngster's clothes and warned, "Stay put or I'll shoot." That's the story where is this the story where she held him at gunpoint until the cops came?
Yeah.
Okay. And then
She actually didn't shoot him.
yeah, so just having a gun scares people and can stop things. "You don't think about getting hurt," Miss Jones, a mother of 3, said in an interview. "If someone is getting hurt, I can't close my door." Police credit Miss Jones' quick action with preventing the 12-year-old girl from being raped. "She's a hero," said Police Captain Robert Richards. "She did an outstanding job, simply outstanding." I don't have to read all like this.
No, that's okay.
No, we're going to summarize it when we do the
Okay.
actual presentation.
But Miss Jones, 28, said her actions under the circumstances were only normal. "I wasn't going to stand back and let this man take this child and do awful things to her." She said she wasn't nothing but a baby. If she were my child, I would hope somebody would be there to save her. That's the same for me. If someone was raping one of my children, I would want someone to stop them. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, the stakeholders are the hunters because they use the guns to hunt, gun shops, gunsmiths, farmers, pedestrians because they're
And just general civilians.
Yeah, the hunters need the guns so they can hunt, clearly. The gun shops make their profit off of guns. Gunsmiths clearly make their living off of making guns. And farmers use guns for multiple reasons. oftentimes, when you're living out in the country, you don't actually have police nearby that they can respond on time. So having a gun might mean life or death if someone were to try and rob you. Also, farmers have to shoot off different types of animals that would try to attack their livestock, such as wolf. Do it.
Or themselves.
Or themselves. Yeah. And pedestrians, any pedestrian can benefit from having a gun, for all the reasons that we've already said.
We should. Can we talk about this in this video, or is it just like? Does it have to dry run? Or does it have to strictly be?
I mean, I don't think it's.
Well, I think we should also put like police officers because they have to regulate like the gun control.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, we can do that. Yeah.
And I have to read over that story slide before. Okay.
Some ethical alternatives. One would be to lessen gun laws, which we are not completely against, but we don't believe that it should happen immediately. A lot of thought should go into it. We believe the gun laws are perfect the way they are. They prohibit those who society has deemed ineligible to have a gun from having one as much as we can. And they allow civilians who are just trying to protect themselves and possibly others like their neighbors in that last story to be protected. Other thing is do nothing, which is what we feel like should happen. The guns, like again, I say stay regulated, and gun ownership is restricted but still possible for a lot of people. Okay, and another ethical alternative which would be to put more restrictions on guns. And this actually happened in the UK right after the Second World War. Virtually all handguns were banned in the Firearms Act. The promise was a reduction in crime and a greater safety for the British people, but the result was the emergence of Britain as the most violent country in Europe, which has been stated time and time again. Next slide. If you look at this, just the League of Shame is what someone put up. The number of violent crimes is higher than anyone else's, as well as rates of incidences per 100,000 residents is higher than anyone else. And to explain it more, in the decade following the Labour Party's election of banning handguns in 1997, it started in after World War II, but it didn't completely happen until 1997 by the Labour Party. The number of recorded violent attacks was soared by 77% to 1.2 million in 2007, or more than 2 attacks every minute. And this is a very dangerous situation to be in. And out of all the worst 6 school shootings, 6 of them have happened in Europe, in the UK. And this just shows that restricting guns doesn't really help civilians. It hurts them more and more, and it's not able to. As opposed to Switzerland, like we saw in the video, it's ingrained in them. They have such a small country that everyone should be the militia, basically. That video said men only, but from our research, a lot of girls have also joined up, and they start having skeet shooting things and long rifle shooting competitions as early as the 3rd or 4th grade, which really ingrains in them how to be safe with guns as well as how to handle them and protect yourself and others.
Okay, here's some of the current gun laws.
Well, gun laws. But they're, these are like the basic, the general overview about gun laws.
Okay.
So some federal gun laws are enacted.
Okay. Each state has different gun control laws, and America obviously has different gun laws than other countries. A criminal record history check is mandatory in all states when you go to purchase a gun. So since there's different gun control laws for each state, I focused more on the Virginia gun laws. And there's a lot of gun laws, but here's some of the main ones. The open carrying of a handgun in Virginia is lawful. The carrying of any concealed firearm by a person about his person hidden from common observation is prohibited. There are some exceptions in this law. That means a person can't like walk in public like with the gun hidden. It always has to be shown. Like when you see an officer, like they always have you can always see where their gun is. A resident of Virginia may own a machine gun, which is kind of crazy because you don't really know why a person would need to have use for a machine gun. They can also own short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, or suppressors if all federal and state laws are complied with. All machine guns in the state must be registered within 24 hours of acquisition with the Department of the State Law. These are kind of questionable laws because why would a person need a suppressor or a machine gun? It is unlawful to discharge a firearm in or across any road or right of way except at the approved firing range. It is unlawful to discharge any firearm in any public street or any place of a public business or public gathering except to protect life or property or unless otherwise authorized by law. During a declared state of emergency, the carrying and transport of firearms cannot be limited or suspended. That means like in a state of war, like if war were to come to America, you would definitely be able to use your guns. That's a big reason why guns shouldn't be taken away, because if America came into like an anarchical government, citizens should be able to protect themselves. It is unlawful to hunt with a firearm while under the influence of an intoxicant or narcotic drug, which this law is obviously not followed all the time because drinking beer and hunting with your family, it kind of coincides. So, but it makes sense why you shouldn't drink to operate a gun, because they're very dangerous. A mandatory penalty of 3 years for a first offense and 5 years for a subsequent offense, if provided as a separate and consecutive felony offense for using or displaying a firearm during the commission of certain violent felonies and drug offense. A person ineligible to possess a firearm who solicits, employs, and assists another person to purchase a firearm, or a person who purchases more than a firearm with the intent to transfer to an intelligent person shall be sentenced to a mandatory minimum of 5 years. That means you can't buy a gun and then let someone else use it. If you buy a gun, you need to make sure that you hold on to that gun. And then if you get caught buying a gun for someone else, then you're looking at a lot of jail time.
And these are our references. Even more references. Basically, our point is, if more guns, or if guns are available to civilians, then it would be
slides like that.
a lot better for everyone.
Finn.